Once you really take a closer look at who this guy is, who he represents, it all starts to become a little clear.
In your head, they are crying. In your head, someday.
Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today we're talking about Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, and his blatant treason that has been ongoing for this whole 3.5 year long shenanigan known as Russiagate, and now Ukrainegate and the impeachment. And the deceptions that he's committed over that time period are all just coming crashing down. So we're going to cover this real quick because this guy has really been a point man in this whole charade. And it's for those who have still bought the Democrat lie about this whole thing and are in this whole conspiratard delusion of Russia, and the evil genius Putin stroking his cat behind all the evil in the world, right? He has emerged as a consistent operative in this whole deceptive narrative, and once you really take a closer look at who this guy is, who he represents, it all starts to become a little clear. So we're just going to start with a Wall Street Journal editorial that was published yesterday, which is really good. I went back to, I subscribed to Wall Street Journal online just because they are clearly still doing journalism in the face of all the fake news. From CNN and MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, Huffington Post, right? It's all garbage. It is literally all garbage that is owned by the deep state and the intelligence agencies. And all they do is just parrot the narratives that they're fed, at 3, 4 in the morning every day by the CIA, right? And it's just very encouraging to see the Wall Street Journal. I know they were acquired by Rupert Murdoch a few years back, but it appears that the editorial board is still intact. This is journalistic rigor right here. So we're going to start with this one, go through a few others, and just kind of take a little spotlight on Adam Schiff, his treason and corruption, and point to where things are going in 2020 and where that looks like for Mr. Schiff himself. So this is opinion. The IG, Nunes, and Schiff. The Horowitz report reveals the Democrats' many distortions. Monday's Justice Department Inspector General report on the FBI's Trump-Russia probe is illuminating in many ways, not least the light it casts on the previous claims by politicians when they were telling the public about what they saw in classified documents. House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff, in particular, has been exposed for distortions and falsehoods. Americans first learned about the FBI's abuse of the FISA process in a February 2018 memo from then House Intelligence Chair Devin Nunes. The memo disclosed that the FBI had obtained surveillance warrants from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court against former Trump aide Carter Page, that the dossier written by ex-British spook Christopher Steele and financed by the Clinton campaign had formed an essential part of that application, and that the FBI failed to tell the FISA court about Mr. Steele's political and media ties. This was news, but Mr. Schiff and Democrats called the news memo false, and weeks later released a rival summary of the classified FISA evidence. Now the IG has settled the debate by confirming the details in the Nunes memo and exposing Mr. Schiff's untruths. The third line of the Schiff memo reads, quote, FBI and DOJ officials did not abuse the FISA process, omit material information, or subvert this vital tool to spy on the Trump campaign. False. IG Michael Horowitz report lists the many and varied ways the FBI did all of those. This includes overstating Mr. Steele's credibility, omitting concerns about his sources, hiding exculpatory information, and even doctoring a document. The IG is concerned enough by the extensive compliance failures that he says has begun oversight to assess FBI compliance with policies that seek to protect the civil liberties of U.S. persons. The Schiff memo also claimed that, quote, DOJ cited multiple sources to support the case for surveilling Page, but made only narrow use of information from Steele's sources about Page's specific activities in 2016. False again. The Horowitz report says the FBI considered surveilling Mr. Page in August 2016, but decided it lacked probable cause. The Bureau moved ahead with its FISA application after it received the Steele dossier on September 19th, and the report says the dossier, quote, played a central and essential role in that decision. Mr. Horowitz says the part of the application detailing Mr. Page's 2016 activities relied entirely on information from Steele reports. Mr. Schiff also claimed in 2018 that the Justice Department was straight with the FISA court about Steele's prior relationship with the FBI. In fact, the IG says that the FBI overstated the significance of Steele's past reporting. And in 3 later applications, the FBI did not tell the court that it had talked to professional contacts of Mr. Steele who said he had a lack of self-awareness, poor judgment, and that he pursued people with political risk but no intelligence value. Mr. Schiff claimed DOJ met the rigor, transparency, and evidentiary basis needed to meet FISA court standards. But Mr. Horowitz made clear that FBI officials didn't even tell senior justice officials about the concerns and irregularities of its Page application. Would the court have granted warrants if it knew the whole story? We don't know. But the IG report makes clear that about the only thing the FBI ever corroborated in the Steele report was publicly available information. Mr. Schiff had access to the same documents as Mr. Nunes. His decision to misrepresent the FBI's actions shows he is willing to distort the truth for political purposes. He gets away with this because he has a willing echo chamber in the Washington press corps. And that is the end of the editorial, and that is fantastic. It's almost amazing to read from a mainstream media source. Again, why I'm willing to give them a couple bucks each month for to continue reading these stories and basically sharing them with you guys. Going on to the next one, John Solomon is a very well-regarded journalist who has released a lot of reports about the whole Ukraine situation. I mean, a number of other things, but he's been taking a close look at a lot of this Ukraine stuff that's being brought up in the whole impeachment shenanigan, whole sham. Right, so this is shared on Zero Hedge. John Solomon slams Adam Schiff's surveillance state abuse, chilling effect on press freedom. Right, so that last editorial was just about the report that Devin Nunes revealed, and just kind of showing that Schiff basically systematically misrepresented things throughout this whole process. He lied to the public when he was telling them about things that he saw behind the scenes, right? He was absolutely lying and misrepresenting what he was seeing, whereas Devin Nunes clearly was reporting the actual state of things, as confirmed by Michael Horowitz. So John Solomon takes us a step further because Adam Schiff actually subpoenaed the phone records of Devin Nunes as well as Rudy Giuliani, and this is a very big deal as far as constitutional protections on the freedom of speech. And Schiff just apparently just walked right over these clear dividing lines, and because he's a tyrant, he is a liar and a tyrant and a traitor, and so this is more evidence to that effect. So here we go. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Domestic Investigations and Operations Guide, the Bible for agents, has long recognized that journalists, the clergy, and lawyers deserve special protections because of the constitutional implications of investigating their work. Penitents who confess to a priest, sources who provide confidential information to a reporter, and clients who seek advice from counsel are assumed to be protected by a high bar of privacy, which must be weighed against the state's interest in investigating matters or subpoenaing records. Judges and members of Congress also fall into a special FBI category because of the Constitution's separation of powers. The FBI and Justice Department have therefore created specific rules governing agents' actions involving special circumstances professionals, which include high-level approval and review. There are also special rules for subpoenaing journalists. If the executive branch, and by extension the courts that enforce these privacy protections, observe the need for such sensitivity, it seems reasonable that Congress should have similar guardrails ensuring that the powers of the state are equally and fairly applied. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff apparently doesn't see things that way. His committee secretly authorized subpoenas to AT&T early this year for the phone records of President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and an associate. He then arbitrarily extracted information about certain private calls and made them public. Many of the calls Mr. Schiff chose to publicize fell into the special circumstances categories. A fellow member of Congress, Representative Devin Nunes, the Intelligence Committee's ranking Republican, 2 lawyers, Mr. Giuliani and fellow Trump lawyer Jay Sekulow, and a journalist, me, John Solomon. More alarming, the released call records involve figures who have sometimes criticized or clashed with Mr. Schiff. I wrote a story raising questions about his contacts with Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson, a key figure in the Russia probe, that brought the California Democrat unwelcome scrutiny. Mr. Nunes has been one of Mr. Schiff's main Republican antagonists, helping to prove that the exaggerated claims of Trump-Russia election collusion were unsubstantiated. Mrs. Sekulow and Giuliani represent Mr. Trump, who is Mr. Schiff's impeachment target. Mr. Schiff's actions in obtaining and publicizing private phone records trampled the attorney-client privilege of Mr. Trump and his lawyers. It intruded on my First Amendment rights to interview and contact figures like Mr. Giuliani and the Ukrainian-American businessman Lev Parnas without fear of having the dates, times, and length of private conversation disclosed to the public. Contrary to Mr. Schiff's defense that he was simply serving the investigative interest in Congress, the release of the phone records served much more to punish people whose work Mr. Schiff found antagonistic than to fulfill an oversight purpose. And it served Congress poorly because it spread false insinuations. Mr. Schiff's report suggested, for instance, that Mr. Giuliani called the White House to talk to the Office of Management and Budget, implying he might have been trying to help Mr. Trump withhold aid to Ukraine, as Democrats allege. The White House says that claim is wrong. The number was a generic phone entry point, and no one in OMB talked to Mr. Giuliani. Likewise, Mr. Schiff published call records between Mr. Giuliani and me and suggested they involved my Ukraine stories. Many contacts I had with Mr. Giuliani involved interviews on the Mueller report and its aftermath or efforts to invite the president's lawyer on the Hill's TV show, which I supervised. Mr. Schiff's team has tried to minimize the contact because he never subpoenaed my phone records directly but extracted them from others' call records. That defense is laughable. Once a journalist and his calls are made public through the powers of the surveillance state, there is an instant, chilling effect on press freedom. I know this firsthand. In 2001 and 2002, when I was a reporter for the AP, the Justice Department obtained my home phone records and the FBI illegally seized my mail without a warrant in an effort to unmask my sources on federal corruption and stop publication of a story about the government's counterterrorism failures before 9/11. In the end, the FBI returned my reporting records, apologized to me privately, and announced new rules to avoid a repeat for other journalists. Yet by that time, many of my longtime sources had told me they had chosen not to contact me for fear of being detected. Others would only meet in person, concerned that my phones were wiretapped. Similarly, in the days since Mr. Schiff's phone record release, I have had people who openly talked to me on the phone this year suddenly asked to communicate only by encrypted apps. They don't want their names splashed in the next congressional report, and they fear a bipartisan open season on phone records of political opponents in the future. Representative Mike Turner, Republican Ohio, a member of the Intelligence Committee, tells me he's drafting legislation to put guardrails on future congressional subpoenas for phone records. That's a good start, but more needs to be done sooner. Mr. Schiff appears to assume that Congress enjoys unlimited investigative powers under the Constitution's speech or debate clause. He does not. I recommend the chairman examine the record in McShirley v. McClellan, a 2-decade legal battle that began in 1967 and pitted a powerful committee chairman against a liberal activist couple in Kentucky. It is widely regarded, along with the McCarthy hearings of the 1950s, as one of the most egregious episodes of misconduct in the modern history of congressional oversight. In one of the final appellate decisions in that topsy-turvy case, the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia ruled that congressional oversight isn't boundless and that the speech or debate clause has limits. The final paragraph of that ruling derided a, quote, sorry chapter of investigative excess. The judges wrote that their decision, quote, can only stand as a small reaffirmation of the proposition that there are bounds to the interference that citizens must tolerate from the agents of their government, even when such agents invoke the mighty shield of the Constitution and claim official purpose to their conduct. That principle is due for another affirmation. And that is good, you know, in the whole scheme of all the corruption and the degeneracy of this system and the deep state, this might seem like a small point, but it is very much a large point. The media might be totally owned and co-opted, right? But there is still such a thing as real journalism taking place, and there are real individuals doing this work, such as John Solomon. And when rogue, tyrannical, commie pedo traders like Adam Schiff go on their merry way and trample over all of these lines and these divisions that limit congressional oversight powers, then it instantly, as he's saying, affects our ability as the public to receive information that we need. And so, again, Mr. Schiff is really screwing the pooch on a number of different fronts, and it looks like he got caught screwing the pooch on camera from about 4 or 5 different angles. Continuing, let's take a closer look just at Adam Schiff real quick. That's pretty much the end of the articles, but just to give a quick background on who this guy is, he's not just any representative. He's not just representing rural Idaho, right? He's a very specific representative, and he happens to represent well, let's just read his Wikipedia real quick. Adam Bennett Schiff, American politician serving as the U.S. representative for California's 28th Congressional District. He's in his 10th term, having served since 2001. And Schiff's district, basically, so actually, let's just go to California's 28th Congressional District, which is where he represents. The district includes West Hollywood, Burbank, parts of Pasadena, Glendale, the Verdugo Hills communities of Sunland and Toowoomba, as well as parts of central LA, including Hollywood, the Hollywood Hills, Echo Park, Silver Lake, and Los Feliz. And basically, apparently has an Armenian population. But so Adam Schiff is literally the representative for Hollywood. Now, isn't that interesting? A guy who literally looks like a pedophile is basically the representative for Hollywood. A criminally corrupt Democrat, right, who represents Hollywood, just happens to be the person who's leading this whole crusade, this charade and crusade against President Trump over a completely innocuous phone call to the president of Ukraine, right? And that, again, going back to, the QAnon narrative, right? Regardless of what you think about it, right? The premise of the QAnon narrative is that Trump administration poses a threat to the entrenched elite class of sexual criminals and pedophiles in this country. And how interesting to see that basically the one leading the charge against him is the representative for Hollywood. Right. This is the map of the actual footprint of California's 28th Congressional District. So you can basically see it is right up here. Every single home up here is basically a millionaire home. And of course, this place out here, this is more rural, but the key point remains that Adam Schiff is the representative for Hollywood. Of all the people in the United States, of all the representatives, Adam Schiff, arguably, and with great evidence, represents probably the more pedophiles and sexual criminals and highly wealthy, entrenched pedophiles and sexual criminals than any other representative in the country. I challenge any of you to name a representative who might, represent more pedophiles than Adam Schiff, right? Perhaps I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. And basically, just to confirm that, I'm not going to read all this, but we're just going to scroll through about Hollywood and how, to those, I'm sure many of you already know, the situation in Hollywood. But for those who don't, right, let's just scroll through disturbing stories about Hollywood's pedophile problem, right? And this is hardly a complete list. I'll let you just kind of read through. But it is essentially, just a set of damning situations about, Bryan Singer, for example. He's still directing movies, right? He directed some of the newer X-Men movies. Mark Collins Rector, Disney, right? Brian Peck, right? And of course, there's Nickelodeon, and what's his name? The guy who loves feet, right? Hollywood is filled with degenerate people who really. It's a unholy miracle that these people are still free and walking around in our society, but such is the nature of California, right? And it's just really bad. A lot of these people are still working. They are still prominent operators in Hollywood, and Roman Polanski, right, as the number one, and he's literally he fled the country, and Hollywood still basically is giving him awards. Right, they are to say that the general Hollywood is just unaware of this and these are a few bad apples, you've got to be hopelessly ignorant of what the situation is there. And you clearly, if you think that, know nothing about what is going on in LA and Hollywood. Right? LA and San Francisco are the new Sodom and Gomorrah. They are absolutely just the loci of absolute degeneracy and corruption. And, I'm not a super religious person, a super biblical fundamentalist, but I think it's very interesting to examine what the sin was in the Bible of Sodom and Gomorrah and what exactly was the supposed, divine justification for retribution on these cities, right? And, people will, explain it away by saying, oh, yes, it was because they were inhospitable to God's angels who showed up as men. But in truth, it was because of sexual degeneracy, right? It was because of homosexuality. It was because of human sex trafficking. And, it's just interesting to think of SF in LA, San Francisco and LA, as the new Sodom and Gomorrah for the same exact reason. Right, and here's another story just to corroborate the point for the sake of just corroborating it. The story of how West Hollywood came to symbolize LGBTQ LA. And again, I have nothing, against personally individuals who are lesbian or gay. I think that there are legitimate transgender people. I think it's a extremely micron-sized fraction of the population. It's nowhere near what we're seeing in the media today. I think bisexuality is fake and a joke, and basically queer and all the rest of it is just a combination of this degenerate programming combined with the gender-bending, endocrine-disrupting hormones in the water supply from plastics and birth control and, a whole range of other toxic chemicals that have been introduced into our society systematically. And, of course, the GMO foods, right, and the GMO soy and all the rest of it. I'm not a big anti-soy guy, but, for people who consume a lot of GMO soy, it does mess with their bodies, right? And I don't really need to read all this, but again, it's when you examine the connection between early childhood sexual abuse and basically LGBT identity, it's something that they want to keep well hidden and under wraps and claim that it's just a bigoted position. But when you talk to actually people who are gay or lesbian, and they, in confidence, they will explain that, they almost always their own transition into being gay started with sexual abuse as a young child. And, basically the dark deviant part of this whole thing that is not such, oh, yay, rainbows, and just tolerance and love everybody, right, is that these people, the worst of them and a growing number of them actually advocate for pedophilia. They see pedophilia as a actual sexual orientation. And that is disgusting. It's false. And the more that they want to push society down this route and accept pedophilia and sexual abuse of children as a legitimate thing, is the more that we're going to be careening right into the real civil war scenario of this country. And there will be violent conflict if this isn't resolved in some other way, right? And I think the easiest way to do that is just going back to the original founding, the 10th Amendment, let the states, basically decide their own destiny, and enforce the law, basically. But it's something's got to happen. Something's got to break. And as the QAnon people point out, there's over 100,000 sealed indictments across the country that have been built up since 2017. And nobody really knows what's in all of those, until they're released, but it is orders of magnitude greater than the normal amount of sealed indictments. And, it still remains to be seen what exactly is in all those and who are these 100,000 plus individuals in this country that basically have already indictments filed but have yet to be released. So that's my video today. Basically, the Horowitz report is being live streamed right now, or rather, the Michael Horowitz is talking to Congress about the report. He's already checked Comey. Comey was like, "Oh, I'm vindicated by this report. Nothing bad happened." And Horowitz came out and said in one sentence, he's like, Nobody who touched this FISA report is vindicated, bud. But anyway, good times. Nice to see all this momentum, and we're going to keep it rolling. I hope you guys are having a great day, great week, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.
Ah.